Hello everyone, this is Mini Ninja speaking. Welcome to today's episode of the Bootleg Breakdown program, where this is not a very promising start to the episode, now is it? It wasn't until I believe I actually read a comment off the Gohan review recently, Dansky17 reminded me that I never actually made a video for the Bootleg Krillin figure that I actually had in my collection this whole time, for actually quite a few years now. And it wasn't until I actually picked up the figure and started moving around with it that I remembered very shortly why I never made the video for this one. And the reason why is, you might guess, I have a few build quality issues on my figure. You got some tight joints, some loose joints, and oh yeah, the whole hip section actually falls apart because there's nothing holding it together. Which, as you can imagine, is a bit of a problem. As you might be able to guess, the hips are far from the only issue that we have on this particular figure. Namely, other joints are ranging from stuff that are completely falling off, like the sleeves in this case technically. As you can see, they don't even hold their place because the pegs on the sleeves are actually too small. And all the other joints are a mixture of either much too loose or much too tight. The upper body as a whole, completely tight to the point where you basically hear the plastic squeaking when you're trying to turn the thing. And then you get stuff like the ankles, which are actually a little loosey-goosey, and the toes, which, while they do move, they're moving in the wrong direction and actually cause the feet to be a bit round at the bottom, meaning Krillin can't exactly stand too well. Has actually very terrible balance as a result. And of course you have the, I want to loosely call it a waist joint that is basically stuck and jammed, and same thing with the shoulders for the most part. And then you get things like the neck joint here, which is comically loose on the part that actually fits in the neck. Joint itself is actually pretty decent quality, ironically enough, but the part that actually fits in the head, mind you, the rounded part, will get stuck on each and every head that you have on there, meaning you will rip off the whole head and neck joint if you try to switch heads. So yeah, this is already, with less 2 minutes in the video in this case, and it's already golden freeze of disappointment material, but hey, let's at least get to the breakdown section, shall we? Krillin himself was a 1.0 style figure, meaning that in terms of the general architecture of what you're getting on the inside, you're getting a little more simplistic things. You're not going to get like your action body poses or your full ab crunch, and definitely the hips are the old style, which is why we're seeing what we're seeing on this particular bootleg. Everything is pretty much matching up with what would have been current for that particular era of figure making. However, what you kind of don't expect is part of the reason we might have been having some of those fitting issues is that the actual figures, and especially more noticeable on certain limbs and the pants for that matter, are actually loaded with paint. The fact that they're actually clogging up various joint openings as well as kind of obliterating certain details here and there. Like, there is a bit of shading here and there of the figure, but most of the figure is kind of a matte finish for the most part. Most noticeably, the actual gi clothing itself is definitely a matte orange finish. And where you might think that some parts are actually casted in orange, no, it's actually just a really heavy set paint that is going on there, which, if you're not careful, can and will scratch off. Like, a lot of the detail on the hips here, the detail on the pants seem a little softer because, honestly, they are painted over very heavily in order to get that matte looking finish. While I admit the actual general look does look nice if you have the figure just generally standing here, the minute you start playing with this figure, you're going to probably scratch off a lot of things. Like, there's actual paint on knee joints as well as the elbow joints, but to a certain extent, which will flake off if you accidentally move around too much and kind of get it caught in the plastic. Like, that whole leg there, this little bit here, is absolutely flesh-colored plastic that has been repainted. And pretty much this is something that's going to be consistent throughout the whole figure in this case, minus spots where they didn't paint it, like that ankle joint, which is absolutely the wrong color, as you can tell here. It's skin color plastic, which is completely filling, while the actual boots themselves are also skin color plastic. You can see a little bit of flaking right there already. And the heads themselves, while they do look nice, you can absolutely tell that the heads are loaded with paint because there is definitely a loss of detail there. While you can see a bit of mold lines, the whole dots on Krillin's forehead are almost missing entirely, and they weren't exactly very prevalent in the original figure either, so they're even harder to see now. Going for the destructo bits, as you can see here, while they will fit together on the provided stands or the provided holders there, it's not exactly the best presentation of it, I find. They're a little more opaque than what the original figure came with, and also they're flat, when I believe the original figure was supposed to have slightly rounded or curved bits, which makes it a little harder to see. At least what I can say though is that the included bits will stick on the hands just fine, at least the appropriate destructo of this hand here, as you can see, and they will fit without too much of a hitch. Unfortunately, what I can't say is that the hands themselves will fit very well because, much like the other parts of the figure, the hands themselves are also loaded with paint, which includes getting a lot of paint inside the joint part itself. As you can see, it's definitely very uneven throughout the figure, which also is part of the reason why the hands don't want to swap too much. So there's going to be a lot of cleaning involved on this particular figure. Frankly, since the whole review and breakdown went by much faster than I would have anticipated on this one, we're actually going to expand the purpose of this particular video to fix Krillin up and get him standing on his own 2 feet, so to speak. And in order to start the process, we're actually going to start from the top here, and that's to open the neck openings on the various Krillin heads so they'll actually be able to be fit on the figure proper and be a lot more swappable without taking the whole peg with it next time. And in order to accomplish that, we're going to do the same thing we have done with a bunch of other figures up to this point, and that's take a screw bit, in this case a 3mm one, in order to expand the bit by shaving off a little bit of plastic, as well as honestly removing a lot of the excess paint that was filling up the neck opening from earlier. And while it takes a few different twists and some test fits here in order to get that, they were all pretty quick, and it just took me maybe, I'm going to say 2 minutes to get all 4 heads done, no problem. And they all fit a lot better now. Here's a little bit of after footage of that shot. Mainly you have the neutral head now and there, but I also wanted to really help with proof of concept of how the joints got painted in this case. As you can see, that's the flesh color plastic peeking through on that particular knee joint. And at this point there are probably 1 or 2 minor scratches here and there, the skin color plastic peeking through on the upper torso. So yeah, if you have this particular bootleg, just be very careful how you play with it, because that paint can scratch off easier than you think. Getting back to general fixes here, Krillin actually comes with a bunch of hands, I believe 13 total off the top of my head, and each and every one of them suffered within the exact same issue of being overloaded with paint, which is also clogging up the wrist joints, meaning you couldn't really switch the hands to and fro very easily. So in order to address that, it's just as simple as take a drill bit, I believe it's a 2mm drill bit in this case, in order to just clear out some of the excess paint, and then with just a few quick turns, suddenly you're able to pop them on and off a lot easier. Which is definitely a good way to protect the wrist joints as well at the same time. So that just really took a few more minutes, and honestly, this figure is already almost good to be reassembled at this point. Now we got him reassembled, frankly, Krillin is actually a really nice looking figure for the most part. Paint job is, when it's not too caked on, it's very clean, minimalist look. There's not a huge amount of shading, maybe a little bit on his forearms if anything, and a little bit on his head. But otherwise, it's kind of a nice matte finish, which tends to fit in pretty well even the more standard common figures, so that's not a bad thing. But there's a lot of stuff that honestly needed a lot of fixing on this bootleg, and even at this point in the video, I still need to fix quite a few things, like those sleeves that keep falling off, and a number of joints that are still a bit too tight for my personal liking. But all in all, for a display piece, bootleg Krillin here is not that bad. There is one more little matter to address, and that's the fact that the previous Android 18 figures we've talked about on the channel also come with Krillin bits, which as you can see here, are ranging from comically undersized compared to the real deal, to just plain undersized. And also this wrong skin color all around. So yeah, even though presentation-wise the decals are honestly really nice in these ones, and in fact the facial detail are probably a little bit sharper than what my bootleg Krillin actually has, yeah, there's no mistaking that these things aren't exactly a good fit. And if you manage to actually get the head to fit on there, this is actually the bigger of the two, it won't be able to fit on very well anyway, because the chin actually gets caught on the front of the neck bit, and thus will not be able to really go all the way down properly. Either you've got to shave off part of the neck or shave off part of the chin, but it's not working as it's supposed to say the very least. The hands are a little more forgiving. This, once again, I believe it's the slightly bigger hand, because the other one is comically small, and even then you can tell the hand is the wrong size for the figure. It's smaller than what the regular Krillin hand has, and is also a much lighter skin tone, actually matching the bootleg Android 18. The detonator itself looks pretty fine though. So yeah, I would not recommend displaying this figure with any of the Android 18 bootleg stuff. They honestly just look terrible. To summarize, while Krillin is actually a decent enough looking bootleg here, just be aware that the mileage may vary in terms of quality control, because when this figure goes wrong, as you can see, it goes very wrong. So I'll probably keep this one as a display piece only, don't tinker around with it too much. Thanks for watching, catch y'all later.